Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the Property and Investor Podcast. I am your host, Paul Lanfear, and as you know, before we begin, my inner lawyer needs to say nothing in the podcast, health, legal, financial advice. Do your own due diligence and research, as I'm sure you will. It is with genuine pleasure I introduce Laura to the podcast. Laura Muse, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Paul. Thanks for asking me. We've
Oh,
been back and forth for a while with this, so it's nice to finally
you
get it in.
you are a very, very busy woman, Laura. So it justifiably it's taken us a long time to organize this, but we're here at last. So if we look at like LinkedIn would tell us that Laura Muse is a five-star holiday home owner, property developer, speaker, interior designer, and you help people create wealth of property. And I can also see that you've had an interesting career before property as well. So we'll probably touch on that as well. I would also add, having met you in person and seen you speak, that you are like just a phenomenal public speaker. You're warm, you're engaging, you're like a real, you are not even like,
Real.
you are like a real human being. Like you are a very authentic human being. And so I would highly urge anybody who gets a chance to see you to go and see you speak because
Oh, thanks, Paul. I
you're
appreciate
definitely worth meeting in real life. Let's put it that way. So, Laura, obviously there's loads of property things to talk about,
Yeah,
and there's lots of aspects that I'd like to get into. But you've got this interesting prior life. So tell us a
yeah.
little bit about this pre-property life of yours.
Yeah, so my background is nothing to do with property. And I'm actually a qualified equine nutritionist, which is probably the most random job in the world. Every time I say that, somebody's like, I have no idea what that is. And basically, I used to go around the country telling people how to feed horses. So that's kind of it. But I'm a horsey girl at heart. I've been riding since I was 5 years old. And up until having my first daughter in 2016, I've had horses. So yeah, that's my strange past.
Yeah. So what made you so you're obviously very well known in the property space. I mean you're prolific, you're prolific on social media and yeah, I mean you'll be a very familiar figure to a lot of people. What was this catalyst then from being in the kind of equine space to the property space?
Unfortunately, I'd like to say it's a really happy story, but like most things in life that create a massive change and shift, unfortunately, my story is not that pleasant. So I was brought up by my mum. So my mum and dad separated when I was about 4 years old. And unfortunately, in 2014, my mum got diagnosed with terminal cancer. So I was a sales area manager. So I was on the road a lot, literally like I used to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I was never at home. And met James in the summer of 2014. And my mum unfortunately got diagnosed with cancer in December 14. And it was just a real stark realization that I've not spent so much time with my mum over the last couple of years. I'm a slave to my job. And to be honest with you, James really highlighted that for me. So James comes back, is from an entrepreneurial background. His family are entrepreneurs, business owners. And it was one day James turned to me and he said, "Why are you working so hard to build somebody else's empire?" And I went, "What do you mean by that?" But
Ouch.
I,
Ouch.
yeah. And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Why aren't you doing this for yourself?" Um, but I'd not come from that background. I didn't know anybody who owned their own business or was an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. I'd just not been in that world. I was like many people around the world. You go to school, you go get a degree, which is what I did. Then you go work in that industry, you get the mortgage, the family, then you retire, and that's just the way I was brought up and the route I was going on. So that kind of sparks some things in my mind. And then unfortunately in 2015 in April, my mum unfortunately passed away, followed by my nan a month after, and then followed by my auntie a month after that. So literally within the space of 3 months. My dad had previously died about 10 years before. He died from motor neurons disease. So literally within 3 months, I went from having 3 members of my family left to nobody. And I just said to James turned around to me one day and he went, we can't, if we're going to start a family, we're not being slaves to the 9 to 5. Something's got to change. And unfortunately, it was a life event like that that led to us literally James selling his business, me giving up everything that I'd been doing, and we went into property full time. I don't recommend anyone to do what we did, if I'm being, but that is our personality. We've got to put ourselves into the ultimate pressure cooker to get back out of it. Otherwise, we probably never would have done it as quick as we have. We probably wouldn't even be 2 or 3 buy-to-lets in if we'd have just continued working, James having his business. We just needed the pain to get back to what we needed. So that's kind of the nuts way we got into property.
Well, firstly, I'm obviously really sorry for your loss, and particularly like the compounded loss over such a short period of time. I mean, that naturally, like what?
It was rough, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was rough.
And then you and James decided to go in with absolutely both feet. So by the sounds of it, you basically closed both businesses. Is that the right the scheme?
So I started doing my own import export business for
Yeah.
equestrian items. Yeah, literally shut that down overnight. James had a multi-million-pound renewable energy business, and
Yeah.
we sold it to his business partner. And we just went for it.
I love it. So obviously you said that you don't necessarily recommend it as a strategy.
Yeah,
The kind of like burn everything down and then like run up the beach kind of approach to
basically, yeah.
But
Probably not with clothes on.
and but obviously it's worked, and I appreciate there's been lots of peaks and valleys and troughs in the meantime. So talk us through the property thing. Like, so what did you start off with? Maybe tell us about, yeah, let's start with that. So what kind of property transactions did you start off with to kind of steady the ship, if that's the right expression, or to at least like create some sort of foundation?
Well, James had a new build project. So we had done, while he had his business, we did 2 shops and 2 flats, which was a new build in Sheffield, which we still own to this day. But James has been in property in and out for many years. His family are all into property themselves. So James had the experience. I knew literally nothing. So we literally just started with the vanilla buy-to-lets, which I would 1,000% recommend everybody to do, is to start with vanilla buy-to-lets. And for the first 2-3 years, that's all we did. We just did buy-to-lets, and then we added a minimo, so a 4-bedroomed HMO into the mix. And then from there, we went and bought a block of apartments. And then from there, we went and did a new build project, which was 3 detached houses. And then from there, it got really interesting when we started to go down the luxury holiday let market. And we've kind of come full circle. So we've gone through that painful experience, and now we're, back to the new builds, which is what we love. Like, once you're out of the ground, for us, it's one of the most straightforward strategies. Once you're out of the ground and have gone through planning. So, and that's what we enjoy doing. So yeah, we've kind of come full circle. We started doing a new build and we're back doing new builds.
That's so interesting. That is so interesting. In a way, like Liz and I have had a very similar journey in that, for a long time we did these, group house shares, and they worked really, really well. And then we got probably massively over our skis, and then, created all these kinds of amazing places. I mean, they look
Yeah.
beautiful and amazing, but the administration that went with them was just like an absolute, it was certainly a learning experience. And now we've like completely completely gone full circle, and our portfolio looks a lot like it did when like
Yeah.
5 or 6, 7 years ago, and like zero, like not like, yeah, a lot easier life, I have to say. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that this is the journey that many of us seem to go on. So it's fascinating that you start off by saying you think everybody should start with buy to let. I find that interesting because I was speaking to somebody this week and they were saying to me, "Oh, Paul, I've started off with this buy to let, but it's just the buy to let." I was like, "No, no, 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 no. This is really good. Everybody should do one." And do you know what the best outcome would be is you discover you hate it and then you sell it and you never do any more. If that's the direction of travel, because if you don't do one, you'll never know. And also, if you start with something nice and like a very liquid asset that can be easily bought and sold, if you turn out that you don't love it, and not everybody loves it, you can just bow out gracefully, can't you? And keep and not do too much harm to yourself, as opposed to, let's say, buying like massive tower block somewhere.
I think for me, I think everybody should, if you're in property, I think everybody should have a base of buy-to-lets because through COVID, through projects that won't go that well, let's be honest, like if anyone says to you that every project they've done has gone swimmingly, I would
Hmm.
say they're an out and out liar. If it wasn't for us having a base of buy-to-let portfolio, we would have gone bankrupt.
Hmm.
It is literally only because we've got the buy-to-lets that keep the money coming in every month. They're steady. They're not,
Hmm.
they're a couple of £100 each month that comes in profit. If it wasn't for having that foundation, the bricks of ours would have tumbled,
Hmm.
definitely. And I think any investor, any seasoned investor, would also tell you the same thing, that it's really important that you have secure foundations in buy to lets before you move on to these bigger, sexier. You're going to
Hmm.
be a multimillionaire in 12-month strategies, which I think we all can relate to. It's not as straightforward as people sell the courses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I suppose what's the pushback on that? It would be, I suppose the conversations that people have with me is like, well, if that's the case, Paul, um, I would have to own X I'd have to own a lot of these things to replace my salary as, let's say, a software engineer. So how do we get our head around that concept that obviously I'm totally with you. I think a strong foundation of buy-to-lets is really crucial, particularly if you want to be a resilient business, particularly if, for example, you want to have like a family life and like other
Yeah.
good stuff on top of it. Um, so how would you deal with that as, I suppose, a question from well, Paul, I would need 10 or 20 of these things in order to replace my salary.
I think it depends on what like we had to replace our income. We had a really nice life, me and James. We really
Hmm.
did. We had a nice income every month. We have disposable, money that was disposable. And it took us 2 years to kind of get to 5 grand a month with the buy to lets.
Hmm.
Now I probably go against the grain of a lot of people out there that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And if you want to get out of your job in the next 12 to 18 months, then you're going to have to expect to go into another job, which is SA, rent to rent, that type of model.
Hmm.
If that's what you want, another job, then that is obviously the avenue you're going to have to go by. But if you're not in such, if you want the right foundations and the experience, which for me is critical, the
Hmm.
experience of buying, going through the buying process, renovating, letting out, managing them tenants. Like people think a buy to let is just it's boring and it's one house, but it teaches you so many fundamentals of property investing, from looking at it to purchasing it, from going through that buying process. Like a lot of people who have this super exciting rent to SA business, I've never been through the buying process.
Hmm.
How can you really be a property investor if you've not been through the buying experience? It just confuses me.
Hmm.
So I don't, for me, I think it depends what you want. If you want another job, if you can hold on to your actual job for another 2 to 3 years to build up a buy-to-let portfolio, I would highly, highly advise that you do that.
Hmm.
Which goes against what most people say, but I'm not one to follow, uh, as we know.
Yeah.
So kind of, yeah. I don't think people should rush. If I'm
Yeah.
honest, I really don't think people should rush to give up the day job to go into property full time.
Yeah.
If I'm honest with you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I remember one of my first property mentors, I was getting really frustrated. and he was such a decent guy. He was like so not full of it. Um, and I was getting really frustrated with him, and he basically sat me down and said, Paul, literally you're just getting started. And then he said, tell me the person you most admire in the industry right now. And there was somebody I really admired, so I said this person's name, and he said, okay, you tell me, how long did you think it took them to get to the point you kind of want to be at? And I just instinctively said, I reckon about 5 years. And so he was like, okay, so you're less than 12 months into like the really busy, nasty bit, like the growth thing, and you think that this person that you think is really interesting took them 5 years. What make like just what do you think? And I suppose that was quite an interesting wake up. And I would say that from my personal experience is that everything, things do take time. And I
Yeah.
think when I think there's a big risk in setting very short deadlines for things. I think like everything you, you think will take 12 months is always going to take two, and probably cash flow wise, it'll be more like five. Because a lot of businesses take that time to mature, don't they? Unless there's some sort of magical app software business or
I
so
mean, I think it's really interesting you've said that. I mean, obviously I'm probably divulging slightly, but it's just really interesting. Obviously, over the last couple of years, I think it's come to light more and more that we see these amazing property investors that have gone from zero to 150 units in 12 months. And then 18 months later, you see all over social media that these people aren't paying their investors and
Mhm.
they've gone pop and that they owe people money. Um, and that's what I mean. Like, for me, I just, you can't do that. You haven't got the right foundations in your business alone. And one of the major issues I do have with property training is yes, they tell you how to go get a property and potentially how to renovate it, but they don't actually show you how to run a business, which
Mhm.
is completely different to buying a house and renovating it. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to duplicate that process, it's a business, but they don't have the business knowledge or skills, which for me is a mistake. And I think a lot of people realize that 12 to 18 months down the road.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the most common story in the world. It's like somebody becomes a top performer in a program, and then you meet them, and you know, you have a beer with them, and they tell you that this terrible t tale of woe about how it's all been an absolute complete nightmare. It's like, yeah, that's really fascinating, isn't it? I
So
think
like our story.
not at all. And I think as well, there is a expression that, well, you hear people say like property is a people business, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but I also, just from my own personal experience, it is like running a finance company. The most important thing is managing your money and knowing how to do that, knowing about forecasting budgets, see like making predictions, looking down the path as far as you can, expecting the absolutely unexpected, expecting everybody to let you down on the path as well. So to me, it's like actually I would say it's not a people business, it's a finance business, and actually the most important thing is the numbers. And if you're
Yeah,
not very good at that, you have to upskill on that overnight. And if you can't upskill on it, you need to dedicate a year of working with somebody who is going to make that the reality, because that is what the business I think is largely about. Um,
100%. And I think
uh,
people get themselves in so much trouble by going out and raising money and um, don't think of how they're ever going to pay these people back.
Yeah. I mean, a really probably unhelpful thing for me to say on the podcast is that I think the easy bit is the raising money. Um,
Paying it
and
back's a difficult bit.
but it's the paying it back, which is the hurdle that everybody reaches. And I think a truth, which is probably a bit of a taboo subject, is that once people get on a roll, they really get on a roll, and it builds up a head of steam, and it is relatively straightforward to raise huge sums of money. But what you're alluding to people who kind of don't go the distance after that difficult 18-12 month period is those are the people who can't service the debt, they can't look after the debt, and
Yeah.
all the
I
rest of it.
mean, we're 6, 7 years in now, and we had a nightmare project, and unfortunately, some of our investor money is stuck in there.
Mhm.
But the critical thing is, we've built the relationship with them investors over the past 6 and 7 years. So yes, the money is stuck, which is frustrating for everybody involved. But one, we've always kept in communication, being 1,000% transparent in exactly what's going on. And they will get the money, just not when it was agreed. But it's because we've built them transparent relationships with people that, touch wood, the bricks haven't come tumbling down. Because if you don't have that longevity of working with people and being paying them back consistently over a longer period of time, that when the shit hits the fan, which it all does for everybody at some point, you know, they're quite happy to, well, they're sticking with us. They're like, you know, you've never lost us money before. We're sticking with you to the end, and we know that we'll get paid back. But it's about how you manage that, and without having the forecast and having us figures up to date constantly every month. Like, we do management accounts for our SA business every single month because we have to, because you have to know where every pound is being spent. There's people that I know that have never done management accounts for their SA business. Like, it's ridiculous. So yeah, going off a tangent there, Paul, but
no, but I think that's useful, because I think that is one of the absolutely fundamental things. Like, if anybody wanted to improve their property business overnight, or actually any business that they have, would be immediately, you know, let's say next month, to have the first set of management accounts. And if you can't produce your own management accounts, there's some really great people. I mean, I can even connect you with sort of people to, you know, to who can do your management accounts for you. And every, you know, second Tuesday of the month, they turn up at 9 o'clock, and they're all beautifully presented, and you can go through them and you can highlight all the different weird and wonderful things that happen in a P&L, and you can strip back the costs, you can see where you're under renting, you can see, you can see all kinds of fascinating things. And it's like a constant work in progress. It's like we have to do that every month of every year for the rest of our lives, because that's how the money is made. That's the truth of it. So give us an example of a project that you've, because we will get onto the challenging project. We'll talk to the extent that you feel able to discuss that.
Oh gosh,
but,
how long
but
we got?
before we get onto that, like, tell us like the kind of projects that you absolutely love doing. So what have been the success stories? Like, what the kind of been absolute bangers in your portfolio?
I mean, we really honed in on the buy-to-lets, that we could turn a buy-to-let around in 8 weeks. And that's like completely like back to brick and rip it out. And like, we really nailed down that process, really nailed it down. But again, it's about having systems, the right people, and James is really good at, we have direct accounts for everybody. We don't pay retail for anything ever. We never have done. And having a real crib sheet of all of our houses internally are exactly the same. So we knew exactly how much something was going to cost. The best project we did, the most rewarding project we ever did, was the new build project. So we did Staveley, which was, we broke ground as the world shut down in COVID. So to say that was a challenging project was probably an understatement, but it had taken us like 4 years to get planning on that plot of land. Like, that was torturous. So when anyone ever says to me, "Oh, I just need to get planning, it'll take 6 weeks," I'm like, I think even at 6 months you've been a little bit ambitious, but we'll leave it there. So yeah, we literally broke ground as COVID hit, so the world shut down. Luckily, we managed to build ahead of schedule, because we were on the concrete cement run to the hospital, so they drop off on the way. And how,
Oh, wow.
yeah, and with our building team, we'd already pre-bought all the bricks, so everything was already on site. But with our building team, they actually were a family. So there were 6 of them, so like 4 of them, so like two and two per property, which just worked really well, obviously with the COVID restrictions. And we actually, it took us, so it was March. By the end of September in 2020, they were complete.
That's amazing.
It was literally amazing. I mean, we had a few issues like with drainage easements and like with negotiating with the school, but that's property. Like, there's nothing ever straightforward, but it's kind of how you obviously deal with that. And James is the master of dealing with shit. Not just trains, but general people crap. And James is really good at, people probably, out of me and James, people always think I'm the like really chatty one and I get on with everybody. James literally can work somebody out in seconds and really foster a great relationship with that person. Um, some of our biggest deals would have fallen through if I'd been left to my own devices because I'm too impatient.
Yeah.
Whereas, but that's why me and James work, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he's yeah, and he's really good at managing people, if I'm honest. He hates being on site, but from like more of a senior level, he's great. And yeah, negotiation is James's number one
Very
trait.
interesting. So you're a bit more kind of high frequency, creative ideas, energy, kind of forward looking, attracting like opportunity, and he's more sensory and grounded, people orientated. Well, that's a really good combination. That's a
Yeah.
really, really good combination. Because if you were both the same, you wouldn't make the same level of progress. So thank goodness for that.
James always says, I'm the whirlwind. I'm like Tasmanian devil. I go
Yeah,
cause all the I
chaos.
go cause the fire and then he comes round and puts it all out, he says.
It's a match made in heaven. And having met both of you in person, I would agree with that definitely. So then, uh, go on then. Tell us about this challenging project of yours then, but only to the extent that like you feel you comfortable.
Oh, I wouldn't even know where do we start. Okay, so um we'd done the new build project. That went to obviously that was great. We sold them pretty quickly, even though it was just still in COVID. We completed that project and we probably had about a year off after that.
Hmm.
And we set up a little bit of a networking event, kind of little mastermind. Like it weren't a paid thing, it was just people who we met up every month and just spoke about projects we were ongoing with or whatever. And we had a few new build projects in the pipeline, quite
Hmm.
big ones, which didn't come to fruition in the end for one reason or another, as projects do, you know,
Yeah.
that happens. And then we kind of went down the route of luxury holiday lets, high-end holiday lets. I love old buildings. We've bought a couple in the past. I love interior design. During COVID, I did my interior design diploma. So it was kind of like, oh, marrying them two things up. Um, a caveat, unfortunately, you know, we take responsibility for our own actions. And we took advice from somebody who I don't think was 100% transparent,
Hmm.
um, if we're being honest.
Hmm.
So we'd done our numbers. We could be looking at properties, and it wasn't our area of expertise. I ain't got a hospitality background. I did SA when we first ever got into property, and I absolutely hated it. I made £1 in like my first month. Like it just wasn't for me, and I always said I would never go back into it again. I suppose I got caught up a little bit in the it looks impressive, it must be earning X, Y, and Z. And this person who we took mentorship with, we went through the numbers several times and questioned numerous times. Are you absolutely sure there is nothing on the market that we can see that these room rates compare to?
Hmm.
And all we kind of got hit with was there's nothing to compare to. So it's like, yeah, I get that, but there must be a ceiling. It's like anything, it's like rent. There must be a
Hmm.
ceiling of this. Anyway, James James kind of had a bad feeling about it. We proceeded with the project and had a rude awakening with the actual nightly rates.
Hmm.
We hit it at the time when we was literally just about to get refinance as well. And there's other things in that which I'm not going to obviously divulge
Yeah.
into. Um, we had a massive issue with the roof. So when we originally bought the property, we had building control come out and they said because in the eaves of the house they were like old tree trunks,
Hmm.
which had obviously it had some rot. So we were like, you know, it does this need completely and like, no, we can just put some RSJs in there, it'll be absolutely fine, blah blah blah. Yeah, no problem. So the insurance company came out to insure the building for the obviously redevelopment. And he came out and spoke to James like, yeah, no problem. We can do the building, but we can't do the roof. He said, what do you mean can't insure the roof? He went, it needs a new roof. Like, no, we've had building control out and they've said we just need to put some RSJs in, like we've already agreed that. He went, yeah, well, I'm not happy to insure it. So unless you get a new roof, and obviously if we were to get a mortgage, we won't be able to get the mortgage without that. So
Yeah.
we were like, oh, okay. So that kind of went from like a 20 grand job to a 100 grand job within minutes because it's a
Hmm.
massive, like it's a massive building.
Hmm.
Um, so that obviously happened. I remember one day turning up on site with James. Now, you've never met my husband. He's a Yorkshire bloke. He's the most unemotional bloke you would ever meet. And it was absolutely tipping it down with rain. There was no roof on it, £1 million building, and we both just sat outside and cried, like, what have we done? Like, there's £1 million building here that's probably not even worth a pound right now. Like, there's just water teeming through the house. Oh, it was just the worst experience. So then there was that. Then so where the main house is what we've bought, which is Foxlow Grange. To the side of it, there's the coach house, which are separate entities now, but obviously back in the day, they used to be one. And on the end of Foxlow Grange, there was like a lean-to type conservatory type building, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
And we knocked it down, but as we do, because we were like, it wasn't stable. We knocked it down. There were no foundations anyway, so we definitely had to knock it down.
Hmm.
There was like a 20-meter hole that's originally like just appeared from nowhere. We were like, what on earth is this? So we all know the price of concrete. So then we had to backfill this entire huge hole, which was basically like some kind of underpass from next door into our cellar, obviously from many years ago.
Yeah.
So that was another issue. One issue that we underestimated and completely our fault was the drains. We didn't get a drain survey done.
Hmm.
All the drains were collapsed. They wouldn't have been able to handle the waste. So we had to put all new drains in. We had a project. So when just to add more craziness to it, as we got the keys, I gave birth to our second daughter. So James is trying to be site manager, new dad for the second time. I'm still trying to do the interiors while we're on site with a brand new baby. So for the rip out phase, we hired a local company that had been recommended to us, literally just to do the rip out.
Yeah.
And we, when we have a project with the keys, like we're on it every day, and
Yeah.
it just they were taking the piss, I'll be honest. So that ended pretty short, which meant James didn't get to the time to spend with us as a family as maybe we would have wanted. And then loads of things come out of the woodwork that they were like buying materials for other jobs. And because obviously we just had a new baby,
Yeah.
and I'd never trust anyone again, if I'm being honest with you. I sound like James's dad. We always used to laugh about sometimes about James's dad. He's like, he doesn't trust anybody, he questions everybody. But I'll be honest with you, after the last 3 years, me and James are them people now. We question
Yeah.
everything and everybody's intention because we've just been burnt so much, if I'm being
Hmm.
honest. And we've got experience and you still get burnt.
Hmm.
So there was just all that. And every time we moved a wall in the house, there was like a railway sleeper in the wall. And then we had the huge thing with material increases, like a plasterboard went up 12 times. It would just, the costs just were astronomical. They went from this to this.
Hmm.
Obviously, with the war in Ukraine and that type of thing, had a massive impact on materials. And then we kind of finished the project and we were due to refinance in November 22.
Hmm.
And the world, again, the financial world shut down after Liz Trust. So our
Hmm.
mortgage offer got pulled. So our mortgage should have been around £4,000 mark.
Hmm.
And it's now eight. So we had months and months of we should have got a mortgage in November. It wasn't until June the following year that we finally got onto a mortgage,
Hmm.
which is scary. I mean, we're in the fortunate position that we do own larger buildings in our portfolio. because categorically the lenders turned around and said if you didn't have a block of flats, we wouldn't give you lending at all. So we went through that extremely painful experience. We were on a bridge, so we had to pay. Obviously, we've gone over as terms, so we were paying extra fees, which equated to about 120 grand of our savings. Obviously, investors were still involved, and it was just the most excruciating, painful experience from getting the keys. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. It really, really did. We didn't have some of the people that we had because we'd gone out of area as well. So obviously most of our stuff's in Sheffield. This was in Buxton in the Peak District. So we were using the odd person who we didn't know, which comes again with its own issues. It was just extremely painful. And if I hadn't kind of been blindsided, which probably is my fault to a degree, like you like to think the best of people and trust people, and realistically, and this is probably quite wrong to say, but I think a lot of people who sell mentoring are doing it to prop up their own property business, and unfortunately that's kind of what I found out after, but it was too late. Which literally sickened me to my stomach when I found that information out. And me and James do wear his heart on a sleeve. We're very we will say what we think and what we've experienced. And the experience we had through that was horrendous. The project, the hand holding, which never happened and was crap, was like just terrifying. What is reality and what was said, completely two different things. But because me and James are extremely resilient people, you've just got to roll your sleeves up, get through it. If we hadn't have had, because we'd gone so much over as bridge and the building got devalued by £1 million. So obviously, we'd not been in this luxury holiday let market before. This person who was guiding or advising or whatever they like to say, got their valuer involved, because obviously they're used to doing that type of thing, came out, gave us a valuation of 2.4, I believe it were. We had Cumberland Bank and Yorkshire Bank and HTB. Yorkshire Bank downvalued it by £1 million, and HTB downvalued it by 600 grand. Now, that is, he would not have liked to have been in our house that evening, is all I'll say. It was sickening, really, really sickening. And the comment I got was, maybe you just need to manifest it. Just like to manifest a fictitious valuation. But I take responsibility. I will never listen to anybody again who wants to take money for mentoring.
Do you know Anki Bell?
Very well. Spoke to Anki a lot about this situation. We've cried on each other's shoulders about this.
So Anki Bell's on the podcast a few months ago, because I saw her speak and it was like the absolute breath of fresh air. It was like something I'd never heard of in a property meeting before, and it was like, wow, this woman is actually telling the truth. This is utterly remarkable. And I said to her straight after she finished, I said, that's the best thing I've ever seen in my life in a property space, because you actually have told the truth about your experience.
Yeah.
And she said this thing that I think might resonate with you, because it really struck with me, is that, we want to believe.
You do?
Particularly, I think, sensitive, conscientious people with good values, they want to believe. They go into things very open-heartedly. They want to think the best of most people they meet. They want to give people the benefit of the doubt. And so it is that thing of people want to believe. And you will often see some kind of unkind things said of investors who have lost money. There's like a judgment after the event, which is, well, they should have done their due diligence. They should have known better. Those kind of rewards don't come out with some risk. And as like as a former lawyer, like obviously I like get that from a logical perspective. Like I tick that box is well and truly ticked. But as a human being, I'm just like, no, no, you don't know what it's like. Like, you know, you people are, yes, you could call them naive if you want to like put, a connotation around it. But the truth is people want to believe, they want to make progress with their lives. They want to create a different life for their family. And a lot of that is what drives, I think, this process. So I don't think, you and James were naive, but you obviously believed, didn't you? And what's fascinating about this podcast is I know lots of people right now who want to believe,
Yeah.
and they are looking at very similar projects to yours.
I we've um we've had dealings with people obviously since we've done our projects, people who've not been that far from where we've got ours, and what they are projecting cost per square foot to renovate and cost per square foot on GDV are massively different. I'm talking like more than double.
Mhm,
And me and James have always been very transparent with people when they've approached us because we've been through the process and we can be really
mhm,
honest. I don't sell mentoring. James doesn't sell mentoring. I'm not doing it because I want you to come and be mentored by me. I'm
mhm,
doing it because I don't want anyone to ever go through the sheer pain that me and James have gone through. Because I'll be really honest with you, the stress, that project and everything that came with it, even afterwards, there's not many couples that could have gone through that and come through the
mhm,
other side. I genuinely believe that. And we have a young family, like doing all that, going through that level of stress and beyond, like even when it's finished, the stress continues. Um, because you say things that are honest and people don't like it. And, we try and help as many people as we can. And if that means me saying to somebody, do not do that project, you're way above your head, you haven't got anything to fall back on. If we didn't have that block of flats that I bought in Sheffield, which had a lot of equity in it, because of the massive down valuation that we got, we would have gone bankrupt. Like
mhm,
it was because we had to move equity from that building and put it into Foxlow Grange. If we didn't have that, and that's what I mean about you must have a really strong foundation before you start going and doing these bigger projects.
mhm,
Do Foxlow Grange again? No, I would not.
mhm,
Would I go and buy another luxury holiday let again? Absolutely not. Because
mhm,
the problem with that model for me personally is there's nowhere to go.
mhm,
I would say that I do 98% more than most people for their high-end holiday let business. We create multiple streams of income for our business and it turns a slight profit. But for the work I put in and for what we get out, there's so much more ways that you can make easier money than that and have a nice life. Like
yeah,
it's a full-time job,
mhm,
and it's stressful. I've had a hell of a week this week with staff. Um, and you can't just go and employ a 60 grand a year operations manager if you've got a massive mortgage. If you've
mhm,
got a building that you can create multiple streams of income and it doesn't have a mortgage on it or it's got a small mortgage, it probably works. But
mhm,
when you're buying big buildings and they've got big bills and they've got big mortgages,
mhm,
it's incredibly different and
mhm,
difficult.
mhm.
Um, and I think people massively underestimate that. And I say that because I did.
I think that's definitely understandable. I mean, you've talked about down valuation, you've talked about the exit finance challenges. I suppose I'd underline that as well from experiences that I know that other friends have had as well, is that it is just so hard with these bigger projects, particularly if they look like hotels, to get exit finance. That there isn't a number of that many providers. They often want to see a prolonged period of trading history before they'll actually really take you quite seriously. So you see people who are having to renegotiate with their existing investors, and those investors are happy to stay in because they like the project, they like the people involved, but that wasn't the plan. So
Yeah.
the property entrepreneur is kind of paying expensive debt long into the future when they had anticipated being off the investor style debt onto like term finance at that point.
And I think it's critical as well. Like when you buy a house, it's a house. So we had two holiday lets because I'm a little bit all or nothing, hence
Mhm.
selling our business and going into property full time. So we didn't just buy one that year, we bought two.
Yeah.
So we bought an old candle factory and a manor house that we converted into 8 apartments. Um, if you are looking at one's massive caveat I would say is if you are looking to do the high end stuff,
Hmm.
you must be able to create multiple streams of income. You can't just be a head on a bed.
Hmm.
That just doesn't work. There has to be so much more to that business because it is a business, it's a trading
Hmm.
business. Um, and it's certainly not an investment strategy for the faint-hearted. And
Hmm.
if you really think that you're not going to have anything to do with that business, um, you're mistaken. It is not a hands-off business at any level. Even if you want to sit behind the doors and everyone else runs it for you,
Yeah.
people are very good at spending your money.
Hmm.
And when the business is reliant on every pound, knowing where every pound's gone, you have to have a level of control in that business, and it's not hands-off at all.
A friend of mine's been in this kind of business, I think, for probably about a decade now, and he has this lovely strap line with it, which is it's not property, it's hospitality. And there,
100%.
and he says like they're a completely different industry. Like if you're getting confused about which one you're in, there lies the problem. So I suppose, um, like if I know none of us can do this, but if you had your time again, or like somebody was in a similar position to you,
Yeah.
thinking about like getting into property, and they're doing it for all the right reasons. They want to support themselves, they want to be financially independent, they want to serve their community, they want to have a family if that's their thing, or they want to ride horses, whatever it is their thing is. Like what, I suppose what words of wisdom could you give to your younger self or to that person about how you might approach this with the knowledge that you now have?
I think it's very easy in the property world, especially when you get involved in masterminds and Facebook groups, to be blindsided by other people's
Hmm.
success or what is perceived to be success.
Hmm.
I think whatever your goal is from day one, as as hard as it is, you must put your blinkers on and only aim for your goal
Hmm.
because so many opportunities come your way and it's so easy to get distracted. Me and James would be so much more further on than we are now if we weren't getting distracted with HMOs, luxury holiday lets. We would like I wouldn't be in Sheffield. I'd be at the other side of the world living my life that we planned to do. But unfortunately, we took a wrong road. I hold my hands up, the book stopped with us. We took the wrong road and just don't be blindsided by other people. If you've got your goal, just put the blinkers on and work towards that goal. It doesn't matter what anyone says to you or any other sexy strategy or what is perceived better. Just please don't do it. Just stick to
Correct.
what you want to do, put your head down and just socialize, make great connections, but your goal is the only way forward.
Got it. Love it. I mean, that is what Stephen Covey talks about in Seven Habits. He says start with the end in mind and just become absolutely obsessed with what this looks like for you. And we're all really different, aren't we?
Yeah.
Like, obviously, you got people who genuinely want the Lambo, and they should
Yeah,
have
that's fine.
it in any freaking color they want, because if
Yeah.
that's the thing, then you should have whatever you like. But if your mission is slightly different, if your end in mind is slightly different, you kind of want to have that visible all the time, so you can do this course correction thing of like, is this part of our direction of travel, or is this just another distraction? This is certainly conversations that Liz and I have. Like,
Yeah.
I'll be talking to her about something and I'll be saying like, I'm not clear whether this is part of the direction of travel, it isn't, and we talk about it and have a period of reflection on it, and then normally it'll come to the surface. It's either a yes or a no. um and there's that lovely, I'm obsessed by this book called Essentialism. And one of the tests in the book is if you're deciding whether to do something, it's either hell yes, i.e., you want it with every fiber of your body, or it's an immediate no. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really good test as well.
100%.
There's
Yeah.
no middle ground. It's either like, is this the mission, or is it not? Um, Excellent. So, I mean, you've clearly been through a very stressful and I would say traumatic experience. I don't think that puts it far.
Still living it, Paul, unfortunately,
Um,
on a daily basis.
your comment about very understandably having challenges around perhaps trusting people now, and you're talking about James's dad, which I thought was very entertaining. Like, there is this proverb which is trust but verify, and I think that's an interesting proverb in life. Is that of course we can trust people, but we also do need to check everything out. And as you have said repeatedly on this podcast, take total personal responsibility for everything, because the buck that always stops with us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and and everything is down to us. So good to ask you about kind of direction of travel. You've kind of talked a little bit about the new builds, but I suppose just to think about another thing briefly, it's like obviously you and James have been through a very challenging period of time. Like absolute kudos to both of you for hanging in there together as well. Like that is so important.
I
And
mean, looking at my face on this podcast, I definitely need to top the Botox. Looking a wee bit weathered.
rubbish. So I suppose, you know, I'm tempted to ask what the key to success is with that. You know, how you've managed to kind of keep your shit together. We could dilute that down to the typical question I would ask on the podcast, which is like, what are your daily rituals basically to keep yourself sane? But I suppose I'm most interested in how, if it isn't too much of a personal question, how you and James have like kept your shit together in what has been a very difficult period of time.
I think the one good thing about me and James is we can always pull through any situation. So even though the holiday lets has been the most extremely painful experience of our lives, personally, emotionally, financially, we've lost friends along the way, and we've made something good of it. So
Hmm.
even though it's an extremely painful business, we've got some amazing people that work for us. We've won awards. You know, we actually are an official 5-star holiday let business in the Peak District.
Hmm.
We've got some great connections with the Peak District National Park and Visit Peak District themselves. So it's the whole thing. Can you roll a turd in glitter? um, Out of every challenge, we will come through the other side because we have to.
Hmm.
And I think there's people in life that, and I don't know if this comes from a place of how you're made up, I'm not quite sure. But there's the fight or flee for me.
Hmm.
And you can either admit defeat and roll over and take it and do what you need to do in life, or you can actually go, do you know what? We've put so much into this. This is not going to be a failure. Nothing me and James will do in life will be a failure because we've got the grit and the
Hmm.
resilience to get through anything
Hmm.
together. Is it all rosy in our house? Absolutely not. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, we are married. Does James sometimes not put the dishwasher on before bed and it annoys me? Absolutely. Um, but I think you, me and James, if there's ever a problem, and I think it does come across in my personality, if I've got a problem or I'm not happy about a situation, I'm more than happy to wear that instantly. And that's why mine and James's relationship works really well, because if I'm being unreasonable, he will tell me, and vice versa. Not
Hmm.
so much James being unreasonable, but I'm a woman after all. So he does pull me up on things, I pull him up on things, but also when James sometimes, or I don't want to get out of bed because I've literally had the worst day, and you feel like it doesn't matter what you do, the world's out there to attack you. He's the one that comes upstairs and drags me out of bed and puts me in the shower and is like, don't forget who you are, where you've come from, and what you have done.
Hmm.
And me and James are our biggest cheerleaders for each other, and I think that's just really, really important.
Hmm. 100%. 100%. So where next now? It sounds like it's the new builds. No more stately homes or anything like that.
No,
It sounds like
absolutely not,
it
unless I'm
sounds,
going to live in one.
well, yes, in due course, obviously. Um, so it sounds like it's back, like as you kind of started the podcast with, like going full circle back into the new build. So tell us about the new builds.
Yeah, so obviously we've still got our buy-to-let portfolio. We've just sold one of the holiday lets, and we've got a plan for coming in January for the bigger place, which is to break it down into individual apartments and sell them off, and then convert one of the outbuildings into a bungalow.
Mm.
So that's all for next year. But also, we're in the latter stages of agreeing with. So we're doing our first vendor finance, if you'd like to call it,
Mm-hmm.
which is a plot of 9 bungalows. So the vendor is putting in the land, and we've got Homes England Finance to do the build, and then we will split the profit. So that's looking to kick off in January. So that's really
Mm-hmm.
excited, and James obviously getting back to what we started off doing, which is great for
Yeah.
him. And then we've got our renewable energy business, which we kind of fired back up 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, we just got to a point where we're just a bit sick of property.
Yeah, just fancy doing something different.
So, so that's going really well. So the renewable energy side of the business, that's great. And, got some exciting opportunities to buy another business. But there's always that thing hanging over your head that you've still got investors stuck in Foxlow Grange, if I'm being brutally honest.
Mm-hmm.
So until that's gone,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm hoping will be next year, yeah, we can officially move on.
Right. So
It's like a bad relationship.
well, kudos to you for wanting to complete it, to want to going the full circle with it, and being creative about what the future might live. And the solar business, I mean, if any of us can think of any other business that's going to go more distance than solar and renewables and stuff like that, I mean, there's definitely got to be a market in. And I think it's great to have like non-property income. I think
Oh,
that's a fantastic
100%.
thing in the world. I'm a big one of the underlying the purpose of this podcast really is around resilience. It's around financial resilience, building businesses that can go the distance, even when the most chaotic things happen, emotional resilience, keeping our shit together in the difficult situations. And that whole Jim Rohn thing about financial fortresses, having um, you know, just a really resilient kind of empire. And I think the solar business is definitely a massive step in the right direction with that. I would urge anybody listening to this podcast, if you ever get the chance to meet Laura in person, if you ever see her speaking, I think you definitely need to go and go and see her. And if she'll let you, maybe you can give her a cuddle, but you'll have to ask her permission first of all, check that she's receptive to that idea. So how can the lovely people, if they'd like to connect with you, follow you, learn a bit more about you, where would they go?
So I'm all over social media. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Well, not it's not Twitter now, is it? X.
Hmm.
I'm everywhere. I also have a social media business, so you can definitely find me.
Perfect. If we had to pick one of those to put in the show notes, what would be like, what's the most go-to one that you think most
It
people
would be Laura Muse Facebook. I am
Facebook?
a baby boomer after all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Love a bit of
Perfect.
Facebook.
That's absolutely awesome. Look, Laura, this has been I appreciate we've covered some difficult ground in
Yeah,
this podcast, but I think it is
feel
the
like a therapy session.
Yeah,
I'm on my
well,
fifth this
you're,
fall.
you're not the first person. You're not the first person to say that. My invoice will be following in the post. No. But it's so important that I think that people see. I mean, this is the whole reason I set up the podcast. Is I wanted one. I just utterly believe in resilience, and that's because of all the challenges that we've had building the empire. It's resilience is the most important thing. You don't need to be clever. You don't need to necessarily even be the hardest working in the room, but you have to be the most resilient human being you can to go the distance in this business, because that is what it takes. And that's everything, isn't it? Like that's being a parent. That's
Yeah,
turning it to a job you don't love. Like all of it involves resilience, doesn't it? And I
100%.
think you've really helped fulfill that in this podcast. And as I say, like frequently, and I know people actively looking at projects that look a lot like this, and I think it's great they can hear a different, unique, genuine voice, because that could make a life-changing difference to them. So, Laura, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Paul.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is the Property Investor podcast. If you'd like to join me to discuss anything in this podcast, there is a link to my breakfast below. Click on the link and join me at the podcast. And keep well. Speak soon. Oh, and please subscribe to the podcast. People tell me I need to keep on asking you that. Please subscribe to the podcast. Take care. Speak soon.